afternoon. Welcome to Certificate Course in Dialogue Studies, Week 12, Session 2. We have with us today Advocate Irfan Engineer, and he would be talking about understanding peace and conflict resolution. Advocate Irfan Engineer is an activist, writer, and presently the director of Center for Study of Society and Secularism, managing editor, Indian Journal of Secularism. He's also the managing trustee of Institute of Islamic Studies and has been associated as a speaker for In Dialogue Foundation for quite some years now. We welcome you, Advocate Engineer, and our participants look forward to hearing from you. The floor is all yours. You can conduct the session as and when you like and how you like. There's usually a question-answer session at the end of the session, but you can also include the questions between while your talk goes on. It totally depends on you. And I would ask all the participants to switch on the cameras because it's always better to have an interactive session. The floor is all yours, Advocate Engineer. Please, you may start now.
Thank you. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. Now, I would appreciate if this is an interactive session. I would be obviously I'll do some more. I welcome if we make it an interactive session. It is up to you. You are welcome to participate as and when you like and as and when you want to. Please stop me whenever you want to ask a question, share your ideas, clear your doubts. Please stop me and I will be glad about that. So, okay. So with this we proceed. Now, let's try to make sense of conflicts. We all have our own perspective on life. What do we want from life? How do we interpret things that are happening around us? And often it depends on where we were born, the country we were born. For an Indian, our perspective towards life, our expectations, our understanding towards life depends on the community in which we were born, Islam or Hindu religion or whatever religion. Sometimes our perspectives differ on the basis of region in which we are born, urban, rural, sometimes born in backward areas. What is our source of livelihood in those areas, coastal region. Then fishing becomes livelihood, agriculture. Depends on the region we were born, the class in which we were born. Our perspectives can differ. Let me give an example of our perspective based on caste. I hope those who are not Indians know a little bit about caste. Often we have a caste with hierarchical structure in caste. Some people are treated as untouchables. In India, we call them scheduled castes or Dalits, and they have affirmative action to promote the scheduled castes. Often the upper castes oppose affirmative action. And scheduled castes support affirmative action. Recently, Government of India amended the constitution and allowed 10% reservation for economically weaker sections, excluding from economically weaker section, scheduled castes, other backward castes, etc. So people have different perspective based on caste. The upper caste welcome this measure, and generally people from scheduled castes and scheduled tribes, they oppose this measure because they were excluded from affirmative action under the quota, 10% quota of reservation for economically backward sections of the society. So this is one example of caste-based perspectives or expectative based on community, religion, or ethnic community. We take example of Kashmir, the perspective of Kashmiri Muslims and Kashmiri Pandits towards the solution to Kashmir problem differs vastly, and therefore it gives rise to conflict. Likewise, I could give examples of other perspectives as well. If any one of you wants to share differing perspectives based on class, which class you belong to, can anybody share how you have different perspectives towards life based on class? We all belong to some class or the other. We belong to working class or capitalist class. We belong to peasants, landless laborers, or traders. What kind of attitudes or perspectives different classes have on a given problem? Can any one of you think?
I can just pitch in and if that's allowed.
Yeah, please.
Yeah, so essentially, like growing up as a teenager, I used to always think, my family was a working class family, and I used to always think that people with business class lead like really boring lives, and they have just one holiday, and and they can never go out of station because they have to open their shops. And I remember one of my cousins went for his honeymoon for 3 days, and I think he came back cribbing that that probably that I lost so much, and I thought that's such a pity, and I never want to be part of a business family. So
yeah, interesting example. I had not heard uh, this way of thinking earlier, but very interesting. Say working class might want security of jobs, might want higher wages, whereas and their perspective towards labor laws would be something that allows trade unions, security of jobs, etc. Whereas capitalist class would say, oh, they should have hire and fire policy. They should be able to fire anybody whom they dislike for no reason at all, or for whatever reason they think is appropriate. And of course, they should be free to decide what wages to give to workers. There should not be any minimum wages. This could be one example of class-based perspectives or expectations from life. Likewise, we can think how peasants recently in India, uh, they were on streets for more than a year, demanding that 3 laws that government passed be scrapped, and they persisted with them. So the industrial classes were thinking on the issue differently on the 3 laws. The peasants were thinking differently. The middle classes were thinking about the laws differently. So our perspectives differ. Likewise, it also differs based on culture, our way of life. Of course, our way of life comes from religion, traditions, customs, local cultures, language, ethnicity. But at times it differs. Our perspectives also differ based on gender. But let us not forget that sometimes some people are able to overcome all these perspectives based on caste, class, gender, culture, community, etc., because of their unique history. They might be born in a progressive family, in a liberal family, which did with liberal education. Sometimes education helps us overcome all this. So while it might be in general true, let us not essentialize our thinking and way of making sense of our expectations from life, our perspectives towards life, uh, based only on culture, gender, class, caste, region, and community. Okay. So, say for example, if I can give an example of suddenly a person belonging to whatever caste, class, religion meets an accident and loses limb, certain limbs, becomes differently abled person. Now the such accidents of life, I don't mean the accidents on road, but such accidents or transformation, drastic transformation of life suddenly changes our perspective, and it is no more only on basis of gender, caste, class, culture, community, region, country, etc. Now you become a differently abled person, discriminated dominant way of thinking, perspective, the sense you make towards life, your needs will be based also on those perspectives. Okay? So now, what is a conflict? Conflict is when people want different things from the same situation, or people who have different goals, and those goals clash, then conflict arises. Right. Like the example that I gave based on perspectives on class. Working class workers employed in a factory may want higher wages, security of jobs, more safety equipments, more relaxed, lesser targets of production, more relaxed way of working, and the owner of the factory may want exactly the opposite to maximize profits. Now, these two goals are incompatible. So, you can only have one way. These two goals are in conflict. You can't achieve both the goals. So, when people have different expectations from life and their goals are incompatible, then conflict arises. Conflict is a relationship between two or more parties who have or think they have incompatible goals. All right. So, uh, conflict suggests a confrontation between one or more parties seeking incompatible or competitive means. Can anybody give an example of a conflict in their life, around them, or wherever? Conflict that they know about. Conflicts are all over every day.
The one conflict is always happened, the generation gap. Like in family especially we see.
All right. I was asking of any conflict that you witness around you? Anyone?
There are many, sir.
Yeah, please name anyone. Anyone or more.
It is
I think
sometimes this.
Akanksha, sorry, Arfat, I'll just mention once that I think Akanksha mentioned the generation gap, which is there, and it's a conflict that happens within families. Arfat, you can continue.
Yeah, true. Yes, one example. Then please others share other examples.
Conflict like no from regions, as you already mentioned in your slide, that one region from people from northeast and Kashmir are coming to Delhi. There is always a stereotyping of the people or
Right.
people coming from the south.
That is an example of ethnic conflict, ethnicity-based conflict. So ethnic conflict. Absolutely right. Absolutely right. Anybody else?
I think
Yeah,
what
Rashmi, please.
Akanksha wanted to probably say is, am I audible? Am I audible? Can
You
anyone
are.
please confirm? Okay,
Yes,
thank you,
yes,
sir.
yes.
Yeah, so I would just like to extend what Akanksha mentioned about the generation. So it's a generational conflict, but it is also, I mean, it doesn't end there. I mean, the conflict by itself, if you say that, okay, there is a generation gap, that doesn't necessarily makes it in a conflict situation. Conflict comes because when we really take it a little further and say that there is an ideological conflict. So I think then we extend it from, I mean, take it towards conflict per se. So of course, I mean, just a brief addition to the previous question,
Yeah.
sir,
Rashmi, you are
that you had asked about class, that when we are trying to recognize, sorry,
yeah, please complete what you
yeah.
said.
So I just couldn't add this point previously. I
Yeah.
just wanted to
No,
add that.
you are partly right. You are partly right. So that's why we have to look at whether there are incompatible goals. At times, two
Yeah, I
different
mean,
generations have incompatible goals, and at times it is not. At times there aren't any incompatible goals. We have to see in each case from in every family, not generation in general, not the entire generation of elders and entire generation of young people. There need not be. There can be different perspectives of towards life, but there may not be incompatible goals. But at times, because of generation, there are incompatible goals as well.
no, sir, just one addition here I want to make. Actually, I couldn't finish my thought. What I wanted to say is that are we looking at conflict from a meta narrative perspective? Is it an umbrella concept that we are using, or we are actually getting into a perspective of individual conflicts? Because if we are looking at that, as in we are moving away from the meta narrative, the overall, understanding of conflict, then the goal itself, there are different goal posts. So for if we have to understand what is the goal of conflict or what is the goal of peace, then I mean there are not necessarily that we have to look at a couple of things that you had mentioned previously as a zone of conflict at all. I mean, that's my understanding. Yeah, so this is what I want to say. Maybe I'll add something else later on
Yeah,
if
please.
there's
I
more
would
thoughts
welcome
to be.
more
Thank
of
you.
a discussion because we understand more when there is discussion. Uh, I would respond to you, Rashmi, like this: that conflict doesn't have a goal. Incompatibility of goals that individuals or groups have gives gives rise to conflict. Say, for example, what example can I give? Uh, I gave an example of a factory, and we are looking at all conflicts. This is a broader definition of conflict, right from interpersonal conflict with friends, within the family, within the community, within the country, between communities, or educational institutions in which which we are, or wherever we are, establishments and institutions in which we operate or through which we operate, there are conflicts all over. So basically, overall, you define conflict as incompatibility of goals. When there is no incompatibility of goals, there is no conflict. There can be conflict. We'll come to that when there is no incompatibility of goal, but there is incompatibility of behavior. We'll come to that. So this is meta narrative of conflict as well as interpersonal conflicts that we see around us. Okay, I give an example of a factory, where the industrialist, owner of the factory, wants to maximize profits. He can maximize only by reducing wages, maximizing production from workers. All right. And workers want security of jobs, workers want lesser targets, and workers want higher wages. These two are incompatible goals. If the goals are incompatible, there will be conflict. Strikes or industrial actions are something that we see as a result of this. Or say caste, or say gender conflict. This conflict between gender. Patriarchy is a result of gender conflict at present. Patriarchal traditions, custom. It is nothing but a conflict between genders. Women are pushed to do certain things which women may not like to do. All women may not like to do. So there is a conflict. Whenever there is incompatibility of goals, or when people think goals are incompatible, their goals are incompatible, conflict arises. Anybody else would like to give any example of, because we'll get more clearer if we discuss examples.
Mohammed Afnan has mentioned in the comments that there are regional conflicts, and Mona Lisa has also mentioned that there could be conflicts with self. So that's an interesting one, and
but that is not a conflict that we are today talking about, because there is no incompatibility of goals with oneself, isn't it? That one has to conflicting way of thinking. At times we change the manner in which we think. We change our positions, or there's conflict within us as to what to do, which path to take, or how to go about life. All right. Now that has to be resolved within ourselves. Right? But conflict is between two or more individuals or groups. Okay. Right. All right. So now, these are some more details. Now there are two types of conflict. Ideological conflict can come here. Peaceful conflicts and violent conflicts. Very easy, not very difficult. Violent conflicts are those conflicts which require violence to sustain conflict, where conflict wouldn't sustain without violence. All other conflicts are peaceful conflicts. Example of peaceful conflict: conflict of ideas, conflict of ideologies if it does not involve violence. All conflicts are not undesirable. In fact, human beings have developed from Stone Age or whichever age to these times. It is because of conflicts, because they faced conflicts and overcame them. Conflicts of ideas, conflicts of thinking, when you negate the truth so far known or believed to be truth, when you negate that, you actually advance knowledge. And when you advance knowledge, there is development, there is advancement. For example, Newtonian science was negated or further developed by Einstein. So science developed, knowledge developed, and those are creative conflicts. Conflicts of ideas are peaceful conflicts and desirable conflicts. But there are undesirable conflicts, particularly those that involve violence. Violent conflicts, gender conflict is violent conflict, caste conflict is violent conflict, conflict between ethnic communities or religious communities in whichever country are violent conflicts. Say Rwanda, the conflict between Tutsis and Hutus, or minorities in every country. Say violence against Hindus in Pakistan, or Hindus in Bangladesh, or violence against Muslims and Christians in India, or against Kurds in Syria or Turkey or Iraq. These are violent conflicts because violence is involved. State repression is involved. Suppression is involved. Suppression of right is involved. So conflicts that involve violence are violent conflict and others are peaceful conflict. Desirable and creative conflict, I just spoke about it. Different perceptions lead to multifaceted understanding of the truth and facts of life. Social realities, science, laws of nature, and other phenomena. Attempt to understand and reconcile these differing perceptions leads to enriched understanding of reality, an enriched understanding of laws of nature and social sciences in form of theories. These lead to growth of knowledge and development, promoting necessary change. So these are desirable conflicts. Undesirable but peaceful conflict examples: disagreements between siblings. At times, brothers and sisters fight during in childhood or when they are grown up. These are undesirable conflicts, but peaceful conflicts. I mean, they do not break each other's noses or harm each other. There is, you do not talk for some time, or they can be peaceful, and there can be disagreements as to what to do in life. All right. Then within a social group, in a community, for example, where certain individuals try to monopolize or dominate. Does it happen? Elite within a community or elite within a tradition, they grab all attention, they grab all decision-making powers. At times it is undesirable because more inclusive discussions within the group, within the community or within individuals, within the society, the better. Say any community, any religious community or caste community, which is more homogeneous and more close to each other. All right. People empathize with each other, but some elite monopolize decision-making power and try to dominate over others, directly or indirectly. Now, this is undesirable, but peaceful conflict. Violent conflicts consist of actions. Violence consists of actions. Now, violence is not just physical injury. Violence is more than physical injury. It consists of actions, words, attitudes, structures, or systems that cause physical, psychological, social, or environmental damage and prevent people from reaching their full human potential. So, violence is just not physical violence or behavioral violence. when you harm somebody or cause pain to somebody, you can cause pain not only through physical action, but also words, insulting someone, or you have violent attitudes. Gendered attitudes towards women are violent attitudes. In India, generally, we are told that women are weaker sections. Now, this is a violent attitude. This attitude is wrong. That prevents women from reaching their full human potential. So long women were not pilots, for example, till recently, or drivers, or they were not in every walk of life, although they were able to do everything that men can do, and perhaps more, that is reproduction, give birth to children. They can do something more, not less than men. But we generally had an attitude here in India, and I'm sure in other countries as well, that women are weaker section. They should not be doing certain activities. They should not be taking decisions. They should not be professionals. They'll falter if they do so. Now, this is a violent attitude. Likewise, attitudes about weaker communities or castes, lower castes in India, the untouchable castes in India, scheduled castes in India. These are violent attitudes. So they are not meritorious, that they are fit only to do laboring jobs, they are dirty or whatever. Or attitude about Islamophobia, for example, world over, is a violent attitude. Then these attitudes give birth to violence, physical violence, behavioral violence. Similarly, there are structures and systems that are violent. Globalization, for example, can be a violent structure.
So can we add pictorial ones as well?
Which?
Pictorial. Like the cartoons are being made of,
Yeah, of course.
Muslims, they're like animals, showing them like animals.
They are actions. They come under actions, isn't it? Actions may be drawing pictures, insulting someone, hate speeches, words, coming up with symbols. These are, of course, pictorial violence also can be included. Recently, we had a film, Kashmir Files, which was giving rise to violent attitudes, which was inciting those violent attitudes, presenting only Kashmiri Pandits as victims of violence in Kashmir and not others. All right. So picture of that kind are violent, or contribute to violence. They are actions which are violent actions, which incites violence, isn't it? So, behavioral violence, attitudinal violence, and violence of structures and systems. Feudal structure, for example, is a violent structure. It deprives people who are serfs or who are peasants or from achieving their full human potential, because they have to do the occupation they are born in, which are laboring jobs, and their labor is controlled by the feudal lord. Their resources are controlled by feudal lord. Their products which they produce is controlled by feudal lord. All right. So these are violent structures and systems. Any structure which has wherein there is growing in inequalities are violent structures. So violence consists of behavioral violence, attitudinal violence, and structural violence or symbolic violence. All right. So when violence is employed to sustain a conflict, right? Okay. There are 4 types of conflicts based on compatibility or incompatibility of goals and compatibility or incompatibility of behavior. We can classify violence conflicts into 4 types. One, when there is no conflict, that is, goals are compatible and behavior is compatible. If you ask me an example, I don't have one. Does any one of you have example of a situation where there is no conflict in a place, in a space, in a social space where there are human beings and there are no conflicts, where goals are compatible and behavior is compatible? Can you think of an ideal state where there will be no conflict? I don't know, just imaginary.
It can be only a cup of water, sir.
Or heaven. Or communists say communism is a society where there will be no conflicts. We imagine an ideal society where there will be no conflicts. Behavior will be compatible and goals of everyone will be compatible. So we don't require a state, a stateless society. All right. But I'm not familiar, at least till now. Yeah, small establishments, perhaps, yes, where organizations or establishments where everything is hunky-dory. Although I don't know. There are conflicts in small organizations and small establishments as well, sharing the same cause and same ideas. Behavior is at times incompatible. So now, then there is a situation of latent conflict where goals are incompatible, but behavior is compatible. I can give 2 examples. Maybe you can give more. Where behavior is compatible, but goals are incompatible. Take any family. Most families. There might be exceptions to what I'm saying, but take most families. Women, particularly conservative families, where women are excluded or made to do certain traditional roles. Cooking, caring. They're not supposed to step out of the house except to visit places of worship or except for marketing or for permissible things. When they go, when they step out of the homes, they wear the clothes that they are expected to wear, etc., etc. Do they not want to participate in decision making in the family? They do want to participate. In Indian culture, at times they are the last ones to eat leftovers. Compared to brother and sister, if resources are scarce, they put more resources in education of the brother rather than sister. Sister has to drop out so that brother can complete education. She doesn't get to choose what she should get educated in, so on and so forth. Do women want equality in such a family? Yes, they want equality. They want to be included. Do men want to give that equality? No, they don't want to. They want women to perform traditional roles and want to monopolize decision making. So there are incompatible goals. But there is compatible behavior. Women do exactly what they are expected to. So, to an outsider, the family will appear to be peaceful family. Women are doing everything that is expected of them. Men are doing everything that is expected of them. So therefore, there is no violence, there is no violent conflict, but there is latent conflict. Such situations are not peaceful. They are violence. There is conflict, but conflict is hidden or latent. Do you understand? Take a village, peasants are performing their role, laborers are performing their role, or take a factory. Take a factory, workers are denied minimum wages, they are denied benefits of labor laws, but they are so insecure in the job that they are not undertaking any industrial action. They are giving the expected production. To an outsider, that factory will appear to be peaceful. There is no conflict. People from outside will say there is no conflict. But there is latent conflict because workers want minimum wages, protection of labor laws. They want greater share in what they are producing, etc. So incompatible goals, but compatible behavior. Anybody would like to add to this? A situation where there is latent conflict. Anybody?
I mean, except war, everything is latent conflict.
War.
No, except war. Except war, everything is a latent conflict.
No.
I mean, if we have to exhibit conflict, for example, let us talk about gender, understanding of gender and sexuality, and how we really, portray. I mean, the manifestation of the understanding and the subversion of the understanding. I think this tacit conflict is all the time there. It doesn't need any institution to
exactly
kind of ratify.
That is what primary, where women are performing their traditional roles.
Now in the US, which was so far, one with.
Your voice is breaking.
Openly, there is nothing.
We can't hear you, Rashmi. Can you hear me?
Yeah, Rashmi, your voice is breaking. Not sure if you can write it in the chat comments or. Okay.
Yeah, okay. Let us proceed. Then there are conflicts in which behavior is incompatible, but goals are not incompatible. Goals are compatible. Those conflicts are called surface conflicts. For example, amongst friends, one of the friend in the group does something which is irritating to another person in the group. Behavior is incompatible. Should he be doing anything that irritates anybody else? No, he should not be doing. Behavior is incompatible, but are goals incompatible? Are they fighting over something, their respective interests? No. Goals are not incompatible. Goals are compatible, but behavior is incompatible. Such conflicts are called as surface conflicts. And then finally, you have open conflict, in which goals are also incompatible and behavior also is incompatible. So the gender conflict is open conflict. Gender conflict is open conflict. Goals are incompatible. Behavior is incompatible. That's why women's feminist organizations are on streets fighting for gender justice, so which shows incompatible behavior. When women demand inclusion and justice, equality, or not just women, LGBTQ or all excluded, and goals also are incompatible. So gender conflict in general is open conflict. Caste conflict is open conflict. Class conflicts are open conflict. Or wars are open conflict. All wars are open conflict where behavior as well as goals are incompatible. The latest example of war in Ukraine is example of open conflict. And there are that's an easy example. But there are many other examples of open conflict between India and China, India and Pakistan, or internal conflict between Hindus and Muslims, or ethnic conflict in Kashmir, ethnic conflicts in Northeast. These are all open conflicts. So we can divide conflicts based on goals and behavior, compatible and incompatible goals, compatible and incompatible behavior, into no conflict, latent conflict, surface conflict, and open conflict. Often, peace activists try to make latent conflict into open conflict so that that conflict can be addressed. For example, in this factory of ours, where workers are being denied minimum wages and benefits of labor laws, but their behavior is incompatible, trade unions organize them to make their behavior also incompatible and make a latent conflict into open conflict. Convert a latent conflict into an open conflict so that the conflict can be addressed. Say in case of gender, feminist organizations try to convert families in which there is latent conflict into open conflict. So that's the job of feminist organizations, to convert latent gender conflict into open conflict. That's the job of trade unions, to convert latent conflict into open conflict. That's the job of Dalit organizations or minority organizations to bring about awareness and convert latent conflict into open conflict. All right. So now, there are four major grounds behind all conflicts. One of the four, or more than one ground. And I'm going to ask you for examples. One is determining territories and boundaries, regions of operation. That is one ground. The other ground is control of land, water, and natural resources. The third ground could be hegemony over others, trying to dominate others in social and cultural hegemony, economic or political exclusion. And the fourth ground could be hierarchical societies and hierarchical power structures. These give birth to conflicts. Mostly these are the grounds behind conflicts. So conflict over determining territories and boundaries. Any example?
Control over Chandigarh, like.
No, that is not territory or boundary. Chandigarh boundaries are fixed. Nobody is saying alter these boundaries. They are, that conflict is whether it should remain Union territory or capital of Punjab. All right. So it's who controls it, isn't it? But where boundaries are questioned, territories and boundaries are questioned. So many examples, internationally and within India. The Ukraine war, Russia wants to put boundaries of Ukraine northwards and westwards, claim certain regions in the east and south and annex it to Russia. So it's a territorial dispute over territory and boundary, right? Or say between India and Pakistan, where around LOC, or between India and China, boundary is not fixed. So there is a dispute about that boundary, and it is giving rise to conflict. Control, or maybe between states in India, Karnataka and Maharashtra are, there's a lot of conflict over boundaries. Maharashtra is claiming Belgavi and Belgaum as Marathi-speaking area, and therefore should be within. It should be territory annexed to Maharashtra or included in Maharashtra rather than Kannada, because majority of people in Belgaum are Marathi speaking. Karnataka has said certain Maharashtra, certain regions in Maharashtra, certain territories in Maharashtra should belong to Karnataka. All right. So these are territorial disputes or boundaries. Sometimes between neighbors, agricultural people cultivating agricultural land, dispute over boundaries, dispute over, say, between neighbors in urban area, so on and so forth. The example of second ground, control over land, water, or natural resources. Examples. Don't worry, please really share. There are no right answers and there are no wrong answers. We can differ on our opinion. It's conflict of ideas, right?
Yeah, there are so many disputes on rivers, like
Exactly,
could
right.
be within India, or the rivers came from Pakistan, or the side, the China. There is always a conflict, a dispute over.
Exactly, right.
People have
Or
mentioned in
land
the chat
use.
comments,
When the land
they've
could be,
mentioned, sorry, please go ahead.
yeah. Narmada Andolan, dispute over Kaveri River, or natural resources. Adivasi, state wants to control territories with mines, minerals. All right. So evictions take place. So how the land will be used, dispute over usage of land, state will control the land, Adivasis will control the land, evictions that take place, or over natural resources. Boundaries on water. Okay. Now, domination over others, hegemony, economic, political, social, cultural hegemony. Gender. Gender conflict is conflict of hegemony, men wanting their hegemony over women, over weaker, so-called weaker gender or marginalized gender. Or say caste, or within a family, somebody tries to dominate over the rest. Any dictatorial approach, unilateral decision taking by or in any over centralization in any organization gives rise to conflict. And hierarchical societies, caste, or the world order that we have right now, where a few countries are dominating and controlling resources, controlling markets, controlling investments. So hierarchical structures and societies give rise to conflict always, because you can suppress the marginalized sections temporarily, but someday they are going to organize themselves, acquire power or courage to fight and question the hierarchy, and there will be conflict over hierarchies, right? So, if you suppress conflicts, we must always address conflicts whenever they are. Conflicts become violent when there are inadequate channels of dialogue, when dissenting voices are not heard and grievances are not heard, and there is instability, injustice, and fear in the wider community. In such cases, if you suppress a conflict by not hearing, not having a dialogue, not exchanging ideas, not listening to grievances, conflicts can become violent. So, any example of conflict becoming violent or peaceful conflict becoming violent because there were inadequate channels of dialogue or grievances were not heard? It can be from your family, from your community, from within the country or international.
It is happening, sir, every day. Whenever the government employees demand some money from the government, they put the police in action, and everything goes in vain, even if they are doing it peacefully.
Exactly, right.
And the experience from student activism, like free hike and all, and nobody is there to listen to us, even nobody is there to talk to us. So there is always.
Yeah, I deliberately avoided that one.
Exactly, right. There can be many examples. The whole agitation against Citizenship Amendment Act in India was an example of, there was no dialogue with them at all. Government didn't bother to dialogue for very long. So the conflict is suppressed over Citizenship Amendment Act. It will become, or it can become violent at times. Or maybe, it fuels terrorist action or violent action. God knows, that also fuels violence, isn't it? So that we must always try to address conflicts and resolve conflicts. Now there is difference between intensification of a conflict and escalation of a conflict. Intensifying conflict means when you make a latent conflict open. That is called, so that the conflict can be addressed and resolved. That is called intensification of conflict. Feminist organizations intensify gender conflict, trade unions intensify class conflicts, so on and so forth. Human rights organizations try to intensify conflicts over ethnicity, or community, or religious conflict, so that they can be addressed. That is called intensifying of conflict. You address injustices happening, although behavior is compatible. And escalation of conflict is, remember these two distinctions. Escalation of conflict is when levels of violence are increasing. Then you need to address the conflict. Escalating conflict refers to a situation in which levels of tensions and violence are increasing. Okay. Conflicts are addressed by intervention aimed at preventing escalation or negative effects, especially violent or ongoing conflicts. There are various ways in which conflicts can be addressed. First is conflict prevention, conflict settlement, conflict management, and conflict transformation. Now, what is conflict prevention? Every conflict has an early warning that conflict will become violent. If you do not address the conflict, when you intervene to prevent that conflict from happening, then you are addressing conflict by conflict prevention. For example, take the 3 farm laws in India. There were early warnings that peasants are agitated about these 3 anti-farmer laws, anti-agricultural laws. There were early warnings. They gave statements, they mobilized, they did rail roko in Punjab. It was peaceful. They were early warnings, but to no avail. Government did not talk to them. Ultimately, they blocked. They sat on a dharna in Delhi, on outskirts of Delhi. They are prevented from entering Delhi, and so they sat on, and they agitated there for over a year. Winter, summer, rain, they were sitting there and organizing their things. So daily, they would be talking about issues and all. So if the conflict had been prevented on the first stage, it would not have escalated to whatever it did, to whatever level it did on outskirts of Delhi. Any other example where conflict was prevented or there was an intervention for prevention of a conflict and resolved before the conflict could happen? Violent conflict could happen. So I can give you one example. It happened in Haryana. Forgetting the name of that town. It is a very famous town in Haryana. I'll tell you, I'll remember. We had a workshop on communal harmony there.
Oh, no, I think.
Huh?
No.
No, not no.
Mewat?
No, it's a town. It's a,
Okay.
why am I forgetting? Just a minute. My phone might help. I know a person from there. Just a minute. This is what happened concretely and really. Panipat. We had a workshop there on peace and conflict resolution workshop, and in Panipat, activists appreciated that, etc., etc. After that, a couple of months after our workshop, somebody tried to smuggle idols of Lord Ram and Sita inside a mosque, with the idea that ultimately there would be conflict and they will try and take over the mosque and even riots if possible, so that communal situation gets polarized. Now, since our fellows were there, they were alert. They immediately intervened. They asked Muslims not to respond. They were Hindus. Ram Mohan Rai. He's still there, Advocate Ram Mohan Rai, and he participates in many Indo-Pak relations etc., etc. He participates. He's a very, and his team of people. He immediately intervened. And first he went to Muslims and said, please don't react, don't do anything, you just sit in your homes, let us handle it. They went inside the mosque, took the idols, brought it out, and the conflict was over. There was no conflict after that. Because Hindus removed those idols. Secular-minded, just-minded Hindus intervened right in time and removed those idols, and the conflict was over. There no conflict took place, at least on that issue over that. That doesn't mean the wider Hindu-Muslim conflict was over. It did, some minor incidents did occur many months later, or rather a few years later. Latest, I heard that in Panipat, some migrant labor was sleeping on a bench in a park. Somebody, some communal elements, he was a Muslim. Somebody misguided him and took him to their homes and then chopped off his hands. So, I mean, not that Hindu-Muslim conflict is over, but at least that conflict was over. That is called conflict prevention. Now, either when conflict is not prevented successfully and conflict erupts, then what you try to do, you try to bring both the communities together in a dialogue. After hearing not both the communities, both the parties, or more than two parties, if there are more than two parties, you bring them into a dialogue, and either through mediation or through dialogue, you reach a settlement, a temporary settlement or a permanent settlement, not to escalate violence. So violence stops at that as a result of that settlement. That is called conflict settlement. That doesn't mean causes of the conflict are resolved. Causes may be there, it may continue, but there is temporary settlement and violence stops. If I give example of conflict settlement, the ceasefire agreement on India-Pakistan border. There is an agreed LOC. LOC is a temporary border. It is not permanent settlement. The conflict is not resolved over Kashmir. Conflict over Kashmir is going on. But there is a settlement to the extent that, all right, Pakistan will at present exercise control towards the western side of LOC, and India will have control over eastern side of LOC. And that LOC will be respected temporarily. There will be no war between the two countries to grab entire Kashmir. Meanwhile, dialogue will go on. The dialogue is not going on is a separate issue. But there is a settlement. Likewise, between China and India, there is a settlement over those borders. There is a temporary settlement, right? Any other example of such settlement? The settlement may be permanent settlement as well. Say Ayodhya dispute, there is a temporary settlement. Supreme Court of India has resolved. It's not a final resolution. It's not over. Muslims still have that feeling. A section of Muslims still have that feeling, but there is no violence around it now. There is no escalation of violence around Ram temple is being constructed in Ayodhya, where Babri Masjid once stood, but nobody is violently opposing construction of Ram temple. So there is a conflict settlement brought about by judiciary, through intervention of judiciary. All right. So conflict settlement is where both the parties decide to end violence by reaching an agreement. The third way to address a conflict is conflict management. where you haven't yet reached the settlement, but some third party intervenes to keep the levels of violence down, to carry out change of behavior so that those behaviors are not violent but peaceful. It's a temporary measure. You have to manage and keep the levels of violence down and induce behavioral change in conflicting parties. In order to illustrate, I'll give you an example. You can add other examples and I'll welcome them. Supposing communal riots are going on streets, say of Gujarat or say Mumbai or anywhere else. Police immediately intervenes and declares curfew or ban on assembly of 4 or more people. Ban on assembly of people. Now that is inducing behavioral change. That is trying to push the conflicting parties who are violent back out at a distance from each other. That is conflict management. All right. Conflict management aims to limit and avoid future violence by promoting positive behavioral change in parties involved, by intervention aimed at preventing escalation or negative effects, especially violent or ongoing. Say in Rwanda, when there was conflict between Tutsis and Hutus, when Tutsis were being massacred on street, UN peacekeeping force entered to keep Hutus and Hutu armies and militias away from the streets. Or say in Bosnia and Herzegovina, when Bosnian Muslims were being massacred by encircling them, by bombing them, NATO enforced no-fly zone so that they could not be bombed, and then sent peacekeeping force to see that Bosnian Muslims are not massacred, that they are brought to dialoguing table, and later on there could be agreement. But that measure of imposing no-fly zone or UN peacekeeping forces entering those areas to induce behavioral change among conflicting parties is called conflict management, and it is one way of addressing conflict. Or say in Sudan, Darfur region, the Janjaweed militias were attacking the tribals there. UN peacekeeping force imposed certain behavioral change. All right. So a more powerful party, third party, or a powerful party intervenes and induces behavioral change between violent groups to prevent violence from escalating, and that is called conflict management. Then there is conflict resolution, where all the issues involved in the conflict are finally resolved. And peace-building measures can be undertaken. They reach long-term agreement. Conflicting parties reach a long-term agreement. All the causes are resolved, finished and over. What are the causes of a conflict? Of any conflict? The 4 causes: territory and boundaries, land, water and natural resources, domination or hegemony, cultural hegemony, social, economic or political domination, or hierarchical societies. When these root causes of conflict are completely eliminated, then there is conflict resolution. Conflict settlement may not be conflict resolution. It may be a temporary settlement, ceasefire agreement. But conflict resolution is where all causes are eliminated. Examples: South Africa. There was a apartheid regime. International community boycotted, brought the South African state to its knees, the apartheid regime to its knees. African National Congress and the apartheid regime sat across and resolved all the conflicts, decided that South Africa will now be a democratic country where all citizens will be equal, irrespective of their race, ethnicity, tribe, or whatever. Elections were held. Nelson Mandela was elected the first president. So all causes, what was the cause there of the conflict? What was the ground of conflict there in South Africa? Can anybody guess or analyze? It was certainly not territories and boundaries.
Color?
Yes, domination, hegemony of one group of society over the other. That was, so that hegemony, regime of hegemony was over now. So therefore resolved. And democracy is the result, where all citizens are treated equally. All right. So that is an example of conflict resolution. Any other reason where, any other example where conflict was finally resolved, over, out, done, finished? And there is no conflict left. So many.
Well, just wars between France and Germany. 100 years war.
Yes, exactly. War between France and England, or France and Germany, or all the independence movement, all the liberation movements, Asia, Africa, Indian independence, resolved, example of a resolved conflict. UK does not seek to dominate it anymore. Or all countries that have got independence now are on their own, resolved. All right. So, and then finally there is conflict transformation. Now in conflict transformation, the negative energies of the conflict or of a war are used to bring about a positive change in the society, positive political change. That is called conflict transformation. Any example? Say, I have Indian example. I'm sorry to my guests who are from, participants who are from other country. Indian examples naturally come very easily to me. And I'm hesitant to give those examples. International examples, if they come, I'll tell you. For example, in Maharashtra, Shiv Sena was fighting that sons of soil, that is Marathi speaking people, should get priority in jobs. Government jobs, private sector jobs, all jobs, because they are sons of the soil. Maharashtra for Marathis. Now there is Shiv Sena rioted against North Indians, against Gujaratis, against South Indians, against Muslims on issue of job. Now these are negative energies of conflict. A lot of energy was wasted in violence, destruction of properties, resources, etc. Supposing a trade union or say a youth organization, Marathi youth and North Indian youth or non-Marathi youth come together to fight for a system where where more jobs are created, labor-intensive industrialization. Then the negative energies of the sons of soil conflict can be turned into demand for more jobs or creation of a system which is more inclusive, where jobs are more labor intensive, and more jobs are created. A fair system, a political change. Another international example that comes quickly to my mind is that during First World War, when Tsarist army was fighting against Axis forces, then in 1917, while the war was going on and there were negative energies of the war, Communist Party mobilized its all the soldiers and workers to come together for a political change, and that is a socialist revolution. Later on, it degenerated into an authoritarian state is another matter. But and it temporarily ended not only war, so far as Russia is concerned, but it also ended to some extent hunger, because they started addressing hunger and other issues. So negative energy of war are transformed into positive energy for a positive political change that is more inclusive. That is called conflict transformation. So let us visit again. How do you address conflicts? Conflict prevention, conflict settlement, conflict management, conflict resolution, and conflict transformation. Any example of conflict transformation? Say in Liberia, yeah. Liberia, women played a very positive, very positive role. There were ethnic conflicts in Liberia. For decades there were, and there was ongoing civil war. Women were protesting against war because they were suffering the most. Hunger, marketing, they couldn't access market. They had to get water from quote unquote enemy zones, insecurity, sexual assaults on women. Whenever there were temporary defeats or temporary victories, the winning party would sexually assault women in those villages, bodies of women, sexually assault women. So women started protesting on streets for long, for peace. One fine day, when the warring factions in Liberia were pretending to negotiate, women encircled the negotiation center, locked the negotiating, both the parties negotiating, and said, you will finally resolve your conflict, declare resolution of the conflict, and then you can come out. Otherwise, we will not allow you to come out of this room. They mobilized large number of women and locked them up. It did result into conflict resolution. Women of both warring ethnicities, warring tribes in civil war, the negative energy of war they mobilized into a positive democratic change. Today there is democracy in Liberia, and Liberia had its first women president, who was also awarded Nobel Peace Prize. I'm forgetting the name of winner of Liberian woman who won the Nobel Peace Award. She was also the first president of Liberia. So these are the examples of transformation of conflict. And this is how you address conflict. Any other example anybody would like to give?
Anti-Iraq movement.
Anti?
Iraq movement.
Tell us a little bit about it.
when woman is, I think in Madhya Pradesh, in any other state, when women were protesting against the sale of this alcohol to their men because they were not going to work, or they were, beating their wives, neglecting their families.
Right.
So government, yes.
Yeah, it is a good example, Arfat. It is a good example. But we are looking for conflict transformation where political change happens. The examples that I gave, South Africa, Liberia, political change happened, or Russia. There was political change. Negative energies being converted to positive political change. Or it can be regime change. Need not be system change alone. But if, as a result of that women's mobilization against liquor policy in Iraq, if it brings about regime change and a better regime, more democratic regime, even within the same system, then it is a political change, right? Or conflict transformation. Okay. So,
The Nirbhaya movement did not exactly bring about political change, but it did bring about some legal change. So does that count? Like there were laws that were from the Nirbhaya movement?
Nirbhaya movement. Yes. I would say. Yes. But it was not as if there was a war going on or a massive conflict. I mean, it was where horrible rape.
Public anger. It was just
Horrible
public anger.
rape was committed, sexual assault, and very, very brutal and horrible and just unjustifiable, inhuman, whatever, I mean, highly condemnable. But yes, it did bring about policy change, not political change. In fact, using that, a reverse change happened, partly using that negative political change happened, which is more anti-women. Okay, so right now in a conflict, how do we? There are 5 strategies: inaction to address conflict, inaction, withdrawing from a conflict. Inaction means you don't do anything; you just wait for time to resolve. Like you are so weak, or that is a strategy. Whatever, you just don't persecute in a conflict, you just inaction. Or having actively prosecuted or participated in a conflict, you withdraw because you are not going to win. You have no hopes of victory. Contention, you, you demand more and more. You intensify that conflict, yielding to the demands of your enemy or the conflict other party with which you are in conflict, or problem solving. Problem solving means more reaching a win-win solution. All right. So this is how you address conflict. Mary Parker Pohle says there are 3 ways to deal with a conflict: either dominate, victory of one over the other, or compromise. Both parties give in some of their demands, or integration where neither party sacrifices anything, but there is a win-win situation. You come out with a solution which actually is a win-win situation. I don't know exactly whether we can treat the Ayodhya resolution as integration, because Muslims have a mosque, 5 acres of land to build a mosque, and Hindus can build a Ram temple. Some would describe this as a win-win situation, but some would not accept this as a win-win situation. They would say Muslims lost out in this conflict. There can be different perspectives on this. But any example of integration? I can't think of one immediately. Any one of you can? Compromise and domination, of course. There are many conflicts in which one party won over the other. Plenty of such examples. Compromise also you'll get. But integration.
European Union can be a kind of.
Exactly. Yes, that's a good example. Why not? It's a win-win situation for all those who are member of European Union. Right. Although at times the right wingers in every European country who are part of European Union sometimes feel that the European Union bureaucracy controls everything, controls a lot of things. When there was crisis in Greece, for example, and the Greek crisis had to be supported by European Union by imposing strict controls, and those controls harmed the working class more. Their pensions were cut down, interest rates were cut down, so that more surplus is generated and Greece could pay its debts. So European Union was sort of controlling, the European Union bureaucracy was sort of controlling. At times, so far as human rights issues are concerned, control of human rights of European Union bureaucracy is far more, and right wingers in every country can go only that far and no further. Otherwise, they'll have to lose the membership of the European Union. So far as human rights situation is concerned, European Union is integration. But so far as economic situation is concerned, it is conservative, economically conserved. So, but a good example, Irfan. Thank you for that example.
Thank you.
Johan Galtung says, what is addressing a conflict? You correct.
Also, I'm sorry to interrupt, but we have like 20 minutes left. So if you could wrap up in the next maybe 5-7 minutes so that we can have question answers if there are any.
All right. So Johan Galtung says that what is addressing a conflict? What do you do when you address conflict? You correct the steep self versus other relationship. This, in your mind, you feel there is a steep divide, polarization between yourself and the other. So you correct that. Try to integrate the concerns of others within you. All parties in the conflict try to do that. Try to feel like others, empathize with their position as far as possible. So correcting that relationship is one way of addressing the conflict. Changing behavioral polarizations. Say between Hindus and Muslims in India. If you change, Hindus are supposed to be practicing their religion or culture in a particular way. Muslims are supposed to be exactly opposite to it. They are opposite to each other. When you try to induce behavioral polarizations and integrate, take good behavior from the other community into your community, that is inducing behavioral change. So the composite culture that we talk about in India, Ganga Jamni Tehzeeb, is changing that behavioral polarization, right? When we talk about great past of great composite culture past of India, searching for removal of incompatibilities in goal. So make goal as incompatible as possible, as integrating as possible. I think I'll end here. There's a lot to be done, but I think we can end here and leave some room for question and answers. Whatever we did, we tried to do or at least I try to see that we can understand enough. I'll stop sharing so that we can see each other. So, need not be a question from your side. Can be comments, can be your sharings, your experiences, or if you have questions, even that.
Okay, so I have a query. So we did talk about a lot of things and the relations from gender to ethnicity. So the terrorism emerges in my mind, like where we can put that and where we can address, like when we try to address conflict. So where we can put that in this frame, whatever you talk about.
Correct, correct. Now, all terrorism is not of one kind. There are terrorisms and terrorism. Their causes differ. All right. So then according to which terrorism we are talking about, accordingly we'll have to put them in different categories or grounds. Terrorism is manifestation of conflict between two communities. Sometimes, say, the Taliban, just give me 1 second. Yeah. For example, the train bombings in Mumbai, where as a result of or with the intention, with a declared objective or intention of taking revenge for riots in Gujarat 2002, where Muslims are massacred. So you will, this kind of terrorism or these kind of actions, you will see as conflict over who dominates in India, which community dominates in India. All right. So the ground of domination. Then the 26/11 terrorist attack in Mumbai, Taj Mahal Hotel and VT station and whatever. More than 150 people were killed in that. Many people were injured. Very brutal, etc., etc. Now that was an attempt by Pakistan. It was one of the event, one of the episode in war between India and Pakistan to control Kashmir. The final demand is Kashmir. So both the terrorist actions have different causes, and you would categorize it differently. If you take, say, PNO terrorism many decades ago, in 1970s, that was more of a liberation movement, Palestine liberation movement. Israel occupying Palestinian territories, oppressing them, suppressing them. And liberation movements are throwing off yoke of domination of another community. Indian independence movement was also throwing off domination of British regime over Indians. Okay. Likewise, in Afghanistan, there were foreign armies, Soviet Union army in Afghanistan that was resented. So Taliban mobilized, or America also supported Taliban to undertake terrorist activities, and they did. But so far as Taliban was concerned, for them, they saw it as liberation movement, liberation of their country. America saw it as a war against Russia in Cold War situation, where people, who will dominate the world order. All right, so domination of world order, etc., etc. So terrorism can be. I think people are leaving. So
Yes, I don't know why. We still have like 13 minutes. But we can obviously, I think for the ones who are there, Akanksha, was your question answered?
No.
Okay. Do you have any
so
more
terrorism
questions?
is a manifestation. It is not conflict. It is manifestation of a conflict. It is a weapon in a conflict. How to prosecute conflict. And the grounds can be different. Goals will be different, grounds will be different.
Okay. Thank you for the answer.
We just, I think, have Kulsum and Hever if they have any questions or comments. I'm not sure if Kulsum can, I'm not sure if she's joined through audio, but yeah, if she can hear. Or Akanksha, if you have any more questions, most welcome to ask.
I do not have a question, but while these things are going, while especially thinking about the terrorist activities and all, the radicalization of thoughts that is very much is there. Like they are not able to pursue their thoughts, or they're not able to accept the other's opinion as well. So that is very problematic to resolve those activities. Very, like, I think it will take a lot of time to remove this terrorist activity. That
But
always
address the main goal. Akanksha, I would say, address the main goal. If supposing the rioters in Gujarat had been punished, state had undertaken to punish the rioters and undertaken reparations, adequate reparations, I don't think there would have been terrorist actions. Either in Mumbai in 1993, because that was to take revenge for, and later on, Indian Mujahideen with a declared intention to take revenge of Gujarat. Say if there were no foreign armies in Afghanistan, then again there wouldn't have been war. It was a weapon of war. All right, and radicalization takes place when you have grievance, when there are incompatible goals. In India, we for our freedom struggle, there were, although by and large, the activities. There were people whose feelings were inflamed, right? The Anushilan Samiti, they undertook violent terrorist activities, which Britishers described as terrorists and we described as independence movement. It involved bombs, placing bombs, targeting British officials. Inspector Saunders was killed. Many British bureaucrats were targeted and killed. Bombs were placed. Chapekar brothers in Maharashtra murdered British officials. So there were terrorists, what is described as terrorists. We call it independence movement. Now, if India was independent, if India was not dominated by Britishers, there wouldn't have been terrorist activities. So likewise, you see other causes. Terrorism is not a cause of conflict. Cause is something else. Terrorism is the way conflict is prosecuted by a party. Right? No. Certainly wrong way. I'll condemn the method. But you cannot address terrorism without addressing the root cause that gives rise to terrorism.
Thank you, Akanksha, for the question, and thank you, Advocate Engineer, for being so gracious. Before I end the session, I would want to share that I was actually in Panipat from August to beginning of October, the beginning of November, where I was working with Mr. Ram Mohan Roy. Right, and I was helping him with. So I'm part of the Nirmala Deshpande Sansthan, which he runs, and the school. And I was helping with some of the admin tasks, and basically also trying to do a little bit of organization in the school that he runs. I made this small video about interfaith prayer that they have, which is unique. So I'll probably send that to you as well as our participants. And I'm so glad that.
Did you know about this incident earlier?
I did not. In fact, I was editing one of his. Yeah, I was editing one of his books, the one that he has released recently, where he talks about all the people that I think he mentions. Uh, um, uh, Sir Asghar Ali Engineer as well in that book. So I edited that book. It's in Hindi, and it's just so amazing to hear about this incident, because I will probably ask him, and this is something that needs to be shared more. I would say more widely, because we do not. One of the speakers in our in our course, Miss Lakshmi Menon Bhatia, she mentioned that it's very important to share the positive impacts that peace builders do, or the positive stories which are not shared as often as the conflicting ones are, because the media gets that TRP and they get more attention, and hence more ad revenues by sharing the negative stuff. So thank you for sharing that. And I'm so glad we could hear you today. Unfortunately, some of our students, left or couldn't attend. I'm sure they would be looking forward. I've already got a couple of messages saying that, hey, we want the recording because we couldn't attend today because of certain issues. So there's also, bit of the season effect.
On the lighter side, one speaker in a meeting spoke for very long, and audience all left one by one, one by one. One person was left. And after he finished, he said, "Oh, you like my speech so much that you stayed till the end." He said, "No, my turn is next."
Thank you for having a sense of humor about this. And we are really grateful to you for taking out the time and speaking to our participants today. I'm sure everyone will benefit a lot from everything you shared. And if it's possible, we would like to have your PPT,
Yeah, of course, I'll share. Of course, I'll share right now. I'll share with. How do I share? If I have email address, I can.
Yes. I will just text
you have my mobile number.
Yes, I will.
Send your email address on which I should share the PPT.
Yes. Sure.
On my number, WhatsApp, and I'll send you. I'll share the PPT.
Perfect.
I'll be very happy to share.
Thank you so much, and thank you for the ones who stayed behind. Till the end, Akanksha. Thank you. Kulzum, although Kulzum is missing, so really, Akanksha, thank you.
Akanksha, you want to speak now?
I already spoke, and this session was really very dialogical. Like, we didn't need any separate session for the question answer, because in between you engage us. So thank you for the very precise way of conflicts, like how the grounds, the addresses, and there are so many things. It really clears the thoughts, like, and updated.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you once again, and have a nice evening.
Thank you. You too.